between as well. So keep your water with you. Well, today with the Creative Photography Group, I wanted to give you guys a little introduction about how I use Lightroom, give you some concepts. So what is Lightroom? What can you do with it? I've also realized Lightroom has a few different versions. I've already told this to Kia, who's in the call right now as well. Lightroom has different versions. So there's Lightroom for your phone and Lightroom for your computer, but there's also Lightroom Classic, which is the one I'm using right now. Lightroom Classic, I would say, is probably the thing, if you can access it, if you have an Adobe license that can access Lightroom, you can probably access Classic as well. I'm not 100% sure. You should check that out. Classic has a few more advanced options, but most of the concepts and the features I'm explaining here are applicable for Lightroom without the Classic suffix. So with that, I want to say hello. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Murtada, together with Kaylee, who should have been here today. She's stranded in the trains in Amsterdam, sadly, because the trains are really dysregulated right now. I'm gonna, I host this meetup and I'm gonna talk about Lightroom with you guys. Feel free to hop in, like unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. Don't hesitate to do that. That's it. Okay, so Lightroom is a tool, or like one of the main tools that I use to do all of my photography stuff after I take a photo. So when I take a photo, I usually immediately like check it on my camera, right? I just check how it looks and stuff. But the actual quality check and archiving and like grouping, categorizing, I would do in Lightroom. Lightroom also has the library. So currently I'm showing you one picture, which is not how it usually looks. I'll open, for example, so here you can see my folder structure. This is my external NAS. So my computer, like a separate computer where I host basically all my photos on. And there's years, like these are the years that I've taken the photos, and I'm gonna just show you a couple. Is there a question? Oh, okay. I thought Gerard had a question. If you could you please unmute yourself, mute yourself, Gerard, because I hear myself twice right now. Thank you. Oh, I see you've turned on your webcam. That's nice. Hello. Okay, so if you are using Lightroom and you start it up, you'll probably see a very empty screen, right? There's not a lot to see because you haven't imported your photos yet. And usually you do that by just pressing File, Import Photos and Video. I'll show you that another day, maybe when I have some photos on my card. But currently, let's assume you've got your photos in Lightroom already. And well, I don't really particularly organize my photos very, in a very complex way. I just have years. And when you open the year, the folder with the year, you can see that specific days, like all the photos of specific days are categorized into their own folder. You can set it up with the import screen. So if you do this, so this is not my SD card, but let's assume this is my SD card. What you could do is select the photos you want to import. So on the left side, you have your source. So the photos you want to import. Currently, I'm in my downloads folder. It's a lot of crap. In the middle, you can select the specific photos or videos or whatever you want. And on the right, you can select where it goes to. So at the top right, you have the actual destination, basically, of the photos. And here I've set up certain things. You can select predefined destinations, but this is my NOS. So this is on my network. It's a little machine where I've placed all my photos. And after you press import, it literally copies the file, but also adds it to a catalog. So that's one of the first things I want to talk about is catalogs. Catalogs are kind of like a virtual file system on top of your actual file system, because like Windows or Mac, you know, having files, that's I would say that's a physical file system, because your file there, if you delete it, it's gone or it goes into the trash. If you delete a file here in your catalog, it will ask you, for example, NS, could you mute yourself, please? NS22, because I hear myself sometimes. So in a catalog, if you delete a file, you'll see that it asks you, this photo will be removed from your Lightroom catalog and any synced Lightroom clients. Select delete from disk to also move the selected photos on your computer to the Explorer's recycle bin. So it's basically telling you, if you delete a file here, it's just virtually deleted. So it's another layer on top of your file system, not really your file system. So if you delete a photo, it's gone from your catalog, but still right there where you imported the photo. So it will still be on my NAS if I really cared. Yeah, that's what catalogs are. They're just like a big like big amount of photos that you have. It makes a virtual file system, so it can look up quickly where the photos are, makes little thumbnails of your photos, and it puts it all together for Lightroom to actually explore. If you imagine you're trying to like open all these folders on Windows or Mac, it would take a long time. So these catalogs make little thumbnails of your photos and files, and they place them inside the catalog, and the catalog usually is on your computer. So even if my actual files are somewhere else on my NAS, on my network, the photos and thumbnails, like the thumbnails, not the real photos, the thumbnails are on my own computer. That's why I can scroll very fast through them like this. So, yeah, I would want to start with just like editing, because that's what you do in Lightroom. At the top, you have the library and you have the develop tab. So these are your main tabs. If you hover over them, I thought you would also see which button to press, but I guess they removed that option. You also have the map. I don't think I've ever used it, but theoretically you could have like GPS data with your photos. So if you go to map, you can see where all your photos you've taken were located. For today, I kind of want to just stick with library and develop, because that's like the main workflow I have. Okay. Any questions so far? You're welcome to unmute and ask.
Do you add keywords to your photos?
Say again? I'm sorry.
Do you keyword your photos?
Keyword? I do not. I do not keyword my photos. Again, I do not really categorize my photos in a very efficient way. I usually do remember which days I've taken my photos. So if I, for example, know that in January 2023, I've been to Florida, I press here. Yep, those are my Florida pictures. So I just manually have like a mental collection of all the photos, which is not the most efficient way to do it, of course. I think there's also currently this is like one of the first times I've used this. So here at the top, you have the filtering, the library filter. And if you go to attributes, you can do flagging, you can do like star ratings. And I have used star ratings for the first time. Let's see, attribute, star. Wait, I want to select the whole year. So you can see here that I've starred some photos with 5 stars, and so my list of thousands of photos gets cut down to the couple ones I've starred. Every time you switch from folder, you got to go through this filter tab again. You see that in 2026, I've started 2 photos so far. And why I'm talking about the start photos is because these are the photos I'm going to show you guys how I would edit. Let's see. So yeah, Lightroom is non-destructive. And what does that mean? It means the photos you're editing, it keeps a history of all the editing you've done, and you can always go back to the original source of the photo. You can always, of course, like bake the things you've changed, like all the settings you've changed, all the like the editing you've done. You can change. You can save that in your JPEG and export it, and at that point, it's baked into your image, so to speak. But up till then, all the things you were doing in Lightroom, it's non-destructive, which means you can always go back. So that's a very good way to also show, for example, this photo. This is a photo from 2024, like about 2 years ago. And you can see that I've edited it a lot. You can see I've changed a lot. At the start, like this is basically the base of the photo. This is how it looked like straight out of the camera, and it's a raw picture, so you can do a lot with the editing. You can see that I've tried a lot. You can also see that I've exported the photo multiple times where I was like, okay, I like it with this editing. But you can see that I've taken it a bit farther, adjusted some colors, cropped it a bit, did some other things, and then exported it again. So this is the non-destructive part I was talking about. All the edits you've done, all of the edits I've done will be traced back. You can trace it back and see all the little increments and sliders you've adjusted. Yeah, what I would try to do, because there's so much to do in Lightroom, right? If I just go through here, these are a lot of settings you can do. So what you see here on the left is basically like your navigator, your presets. You can also have presets in Lightroom. I might talk about that in a little bit. Your history, which is important. You can make snapshots, which is basically a Lightroom specific way to save your image in Lightroom, so you can always go back, because remembering which edit you liked is kind of hard sometimes, especially if you do not export in between. It's hard to see, oh yeah, that was the point where I was like, I was debating if I liked the image there or not. But snapshots, you can actually make a new snapshot, and it basically takes that let's see, let's go here. This is the oldest version, and if I wanted to, I could switch to the snapshot right away. And in this snapshot, all the history has been compressed, so you can always go back to certain snapshots like that. Collections, I usually don't use collections. I don't actually know what they're for. Maybe that's for more of like categorizing your photos. If anyone knows, please do fill in what it does. But I don't think it's that important right now, because I'm going to talk about my workflow of editing, and it usually is my workflow of editing, and it usually is. Did you want to ask something, Gerard? Did you want to ask something, Gerard?
Yeah, I have a
I
question.
unmuted to say I use
Could you, sometimes I'm working with masks, and then I want to delete something I'm not satisfied. Would you show in the history if it is possible to remove something I did in the past, what I'm not happy about? Is that an option?
Hold on, sorry. I have. Is it on my end? I hear you twice. I hear you double. Capture again. Okay. Could you repeat your question, please? Gerard.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I had an issue on my end. Please repeat yourself.
My question was, when I'm, for example, working with masks,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not happy about something.
Mm-hmm.
You just show the list of the history of all the changes you made
Yes.
to the photo. My question is, when I'm not happy about certain things I did, can I, let's say, remove it from the history, delete it?
That's a good question. Um, I will explain it in a bit, but
Okay.
basically what you have to do is rewrite the history. So you cannot specifically like remove that specific step. So history is like a flow, and if you want to remove one step out of the flow, you'll have to go back to the step before that one and then start editing again. So you will lose the changes you've made after that, which is a kind of a limitation, I would say. But that's how they've said it. It's like chronological order. You cannot remove something in between and then continue on. I can show you guys right now, like all these edits I've done before on this photo. Let's say I didn't like the, let's go here. Let's, if I do any kind of change here, it basically puts that change at the top. And I've lost all the future changes I've made. If I undo, you can see my changes are back again. So like it basically rewrites history from that point on. So I'm here at hide mask 1. I'm going to increase my exposure. You'll see that hide mask 1 is now here at the top, and my exposure changes at like the first step of the history, like if counting backwards. So you basically lose all the information afterwards. As far as I know, like maybe there is a way to do that, because I do see. No, I think what I'm saying is right at this moment in like in how Lightroom works. So yeah, it is a limitation you have to work around if you think, oh, the changes I've made past this moment are the ones I do want to keep. You might want to not go back in history, select that step, and adjust that specific setting, because you'll lose all the information afterwards, all the steps you've made. I would recommend instead to find that specific setting you've changed. For example, update color temperature. Um, does it actually? Thought it also showed somewhere where the actual changes. Um, okay, well here it does. These are mask changes, right? But here you can see that I've changed the temperature plus 328 6K. So there's a slight, very slight change in temperature here. What I would do is just remember this change. So you can see here at the right as well, this number changes from 5707 to 6035. So say I wanted to go back to that number, so I'll have to go 5707, right? So now I've theoretically, like practically undid. I undo I did undo that step that I wanted to change, which was this temperature change. So it is a hard way to work around that limitation, but it's basically the only way. You have to remember the steps you've made along the way and adjust it like that. And yeah. Okay. So any other questions? Because I'm gonna just show you how I would like this. This is the original image. And I'm gonna show you how I would like adjust this image right now. Because some of the concepts are you can just use for other editing tools as well. Now, I don't know if you guys are a fan of my edits, because everything you do is subjective, right? I'm not saying this is the way to edit your photos, but I personally, like if I compare this image to the initial image, I would say it's definitely an improvement. You can always, talk about, oh, I would maybe make it less warm, or I would crop it slightly differently, stuff like that. You can always talk about that, and it's subjective. So feel free to find your own version of the edit you like. First things, first things first, I would look at composition. So if I open an image and I want to adjust my image, first thing I would try to do is, while I'm taking the photo, I'm of course thinking about composition. I'm looking at perspective, composition, trying to like angle myself in a way. And you'll take the photo, and the photo you'll have on your computer is not the last version of the photo, right? Of course, you can edit it, but cropping is probably one of the first things you should do. Um, I would say cropping gives a lot of impact, or changes the impact of your image, how people perceive it, and what the focus point is of your image. So you can go to the crop tool, and you'll get an overlay. And with this overlay, you can, I have the rule of thirds selected. I think you can adjust that too somewhere. But rule of thirds usually works for me because I like to keep that in mind when I crop. I personally do not like the image aspect ratio because the original is like really tall, and specifically for this image, there's not a lot of interesting information right at the top. Like over here, there's barely anything here. At the bottom, it's also just a blurry, like mess of grass. So I would personally already think about, okay, what if I change the aspect ratio to like 5:4? I already am starting to like this more. I would want to keep my whole fox in the image. Um, you can press F to go into full screen mode. And also, like, if your image is very like you're getting distracted by the background and stuff of the tool, you can press F to go into full screen. Yeah, okay. So this is the first crop I've made. If you look at the original image, you can always check the history on your left. I hover over it. I do not click, because clicking actually brings you to that point in time in history. So I want to stay at the last version, but when I hover, I can see all the little changes I've made. So this is the original image. This is our cropped version. We can always go back to the crop tool and adjust it later if we do not like the crop right now. Any questions about the cropping tool, or cropping as a concept? Okay. I would say the next step I personally look at is light. You can think about light in multiple ways. Uh, something I think maybe I'm sometimes a bit autistic or something, but that's fine. I would squint my eyes. Like if you squint your eyes while looking at, even like in real life, you'll not look at shapes anymore, but you'll look in light values. So if I squint my eyes, I see there's a very, very bright light right here. And I cannot see the fox really. I kind of see the shape of the ears and stuff, but I don't really see the fox. So that tells me that my light values are off in this image, because I do want to see the fox. I want to be able to recognize it even while squinting. I would like, that's my goal in this image. And here at the top right, you can see the histogram. And the histogram also gives you a quick overview of how your light is distributed. You can see there's some blue, there's one peak of red over there, and then there's a lot of green. And also in the highlights, there's a lot of green and a bit of red. And if you know like the color wheel and additive colors, the color science of it, like color additions, you'll know that green and red equals orange, and blue and red equals purple. So there's a lot of like, in the highlights, there's a lot of orange and green, and in the dark parts of the image, there's a lot of blue purple, which is not a bad thing. I think that's a very nice. Like the colors are very. I'm looking for the word. They complement each other, so you can do a lot of like artistic things with these complementary colors. But I would probably select this histogram, and you can see there's like a little like slider or arrow pointing horizontal thing, and you can actually drag it horizontally. So I'm moving my mouse left to right after clicking. You can see I can like drag the entire histogram, and there are parts of the histogram you can select and like do the middle part, the highlights, the whites, the shadows, and the blacks. So the middle part, they call it exposure, which is basically just drag the whole thing down or up. So you're taking all the colors, all the lights, and then bring them up or down. That is one way to do it. I'm going back to the crop step because I do not really use the histogram like that. I personally think it's not fine-tuned enough. First thing I would probably do, which is really cool about Lightroom nowadays, you can do just subject masking. And this is a very powerful tool because if you select the masking tool, right? I selected it and then I just literally did subject. It finds the subject in your image. And it's 9 out of 10 times pretty accurate. But let me see. You can see that with the overlay visible, there are some parts that are not correct. Like, for example, if it selected a bit of this grain, this grass, this wheat grass thing. So you might have to manually adjust a part of it. So you can do that too. And right click this and then intersect mask with. And since this is a very like small area that is not, I don't think the Lightroom algorithm understands what it's looking at right now. So I'll just use brush, right? Actually, I made a mistake. So it's not intersect with, but you don't right click it. You actually look down here, subtract from mask, and then you do brush. Now you get a brush which you can draw with, and you can basically remove the mask from this little wheat head. I don't know what it's called. So you can see that I've just deselected this bit of grass. Right. I'm just double checking my phone. Checking in with my wife. Okay. So you'll see that I've deselected this part of the wheat, but it's a bit too harsh, right? But I have a very simple solution. And with this, I would say I right click this. You can also do it maybe in a different way, but I like to right click this and then intersect mask with, and then I would do radial gradient. And then I'm dragging a radial gradient from the head. You can always adjust this a bit like this. And what this does, you can also change like the inner radius of the gradient and the outer radius of the gradient. So as you can see, when I'm dragging the gradient, it's either selecting or mask, like it's adjusting the mask, right? The mask is on the little fox, and adjusting the gradient actually removes parts of it in a very smooth way. So now you can see that it fades out towards the bottom of the fox in the grass. So the mask is kind of like more gentle and it's fading out towards the bottom, and you can focus more on the highlights and stuff at the top of the fox, like at the face, at the fur here. I would probably put it somewhere like here. Maybe do it like this. Something like this. Maybe we'll adjust it later. It's non-destructive. So if I select this, you can now clearly see there's like a weird glow, and that's like the red showing the mask that we've made. Now with this mask selected, you have to be in this mask tab, in the masking tab. You can still do all your basic adjustments. So if I turn off this tab, you see that I'm back into the main UI. And you can see that we have exposure and stuff like that over here too. But if I select the mask tab again, I have to select this specific mask. You see that I have this exposure specifically for this mask. So with these sliders right now, you can adjust all the settings within that mask. Maybe like a very fundamental concept. Maybe a lot of people know this already. But I think it's good to understand like what exactly is happening when you're doing all this stuff. How it impacts the UI and what you can do with it. So let's see. I like to zoom out a little bit more. Like this. And I'm just checking the colors and the lights. So I would always have this history on the left and like hover over it, see what I'm doing. But at this point, I think that's plenty. So that's the foreground right now. Let's do the background. So you can do select the background. So you create a new mask and then select background. And it's funny because you cannot change the the layers. So you would think, oh, I could just drag this below this one. You cannot. So that's something you have to keep in mind. Maybe you want to, start with the background first and then do the foreground. It theoretically shouldn't affect each other because it's like additive, but I can imagine in some situations you want to have the background masked first and then the foreground. Okay, so the background mask is basically selecting everything except for the fox. I think it's also, yeah, partially including this wheat, which is not great. I wish it was like, it was completely red here. So we could do that. We can do add brush. And then with scroll wheel, you can change the size of your brush. Let's do 100%. I'm just highlighting this. Okay. And then now we've got the mask we want. And I'm still in the mask tab. I'm down here. I'm going to select this mask. So I was in like a brush UI. If you select this, you'll get this little brush UI here at the top. And with that, you can also adjust the size, the feather, which is like how fast it falls off on the edges of your brush. And flow, like basically it's how often it draws, and density is the opacity basically. But that's the brush. The exposure. Can we change the exposure completely? Yes. Does it look great? Maybe up to a point, but it quickly looks very weird, right? Because the fox is cut out of the mask. So we can still adjust the mask a bit, but I would honestly suggest maybe this is the first time we would adjust like whites and highlights instead, just a little bit. So let's see. We were here and we did this, and we're gonna get some artifacts. You're like, what the hell are artifacts? Well, that's when two masks overlap, partially overlap, and they have different settings. You can see here that the fuzz and the hair around the fox looks a bit weird. Almost looks like too soft or something. See that? It lost a lot of detail. So that is one issue with masks I have, is like when it gets very complex, the mask is just inaccurate. You can see here that the mask for selecting the background is selecting the hairs as well, while the mask selecting the fox is just not precise enough to select all the small hairs. So that is kind of a tricky thing. And there's a fine line between like a tasteful mask, a tasteful edit, and one that's too harsh and just looks unnatural. And there are limitations to how far you can take your edit. But currently, I'm okay with this, especially if you zoom out a bit. But I think the biggest issue is right here. The fuzz is very, very dark on the outside, while it's very light on the inside. So we might have to change that later. that's basically the light right now. I got out of the mask tool, and I'm gonna do the big exposure, like the full image dials basically. So I'm changing the exposure and the highlights a bit of the whites, changing the blacks, maybe some more exposure. I see, like, when I select, I know that there's nothing overexposed, right? But there's the, well, actually, good thing I zoomed in. Some parts of the face are already overexposed. And at the histogram here at the top, you can see that there's these little triangles. There's one at the left, which is for blacks, and there's one on the right, which is for the whites. And with this, you can see when you've got an overexposed part of your image. And the white parts that are overexposed will show red, and the black parts will show blue. Yeah, I can show you that too. Let's say, see, like if I just lower the exposure, you can see that there's a lot of underexposed parts here. Uh, I would honestly try to find a way to get your image in the range where it's not overexposed or underexposed. None of the parts, like there's some in the nose here. You can see that actually. I don't know. Let me see. Yeah, there's some parts in the nose that are underexposed. That's fine. But this is a bit much, I would say, because on certain screens it will look really weird. I would try to like adjust this a bit. It's hard to see also on the histogram that it's overexposed. You have to select this highlight clipping button to see it. So with this, you can now go to the fox. I went back to masking and selected the fox mask, and I'm gonna lower the exposure a little bit. I'm gonna do some adjustments right there. I'm basically toned it down a bit. It's a bit much. I'm out of the exposure. Sorry, the mask again. Okay. I'm adding some dehaze. I'm putting some blacks in there. The shadows are okay. Okay. So that's masking and light. I kind of like it already. Let's see how we started. We're now at this. It's a bit much, maybe to HDR effect, but we'll fine tune it later. Any questions about masking and light so far? All right. I want to go to the next step. Oops, I misclicked. White balance. You can, like, these are interchangeable. I think sometimes I start with the white balance, which is this slider here. And sometimes I start with the light with the mask. I'm not sure. It's like 50-50. Sometimes I take the slider and start to play with it right away. Sometimes I just go to masking and select the subject right away. I think personally I prefer to do the light step first, and then I'll check in with the color temperature. Color temperature is very tricky. On one hand, there's science behind it. There is like an objective truth to what is actually like a well-balanced color or a well-balanced image. I personally think nobody cares as long as the image looks good. This was during sunset. This photo was taken during sunset. I've taken this picture, I'm pretty sure, with like auto white balance on my camera. I'm pretty sure. I can find that somewhere, maybe in some of the metadata on the picture. But my point is, if you're shooting in RAW, you can always adjust it and adjust like the feel and the temperature of your picture. Oh, right now, I've lowered it, so the temperature is a bit lower. It's very cold. It almost seems like darker, right? It's like during a later part of the day. You can maybe do that like this. Now it almost looks like blue hour, like sun is already down or something, and that's maybe moonlight in the background. If I increase the temperature, increase the exposure, like this, now it's almost like, oh, it's a warm sunset on a summer day. So you can adjust the mood of the picture very quickly, and that's why I think like focusing too much on white balance is kind of a waste of time. Having a good like out of the camera setting to have your white balance set up correctly from the get-go is good, but since you're shooting in RAW, you can always adjust it afterwards. You can always use the little pipette or like eyedropper tool. And I know the fox is not perfectly white. It's probably a bit like yellowish, but you can select this. And I mean, this is basically the best white balance you can get. And don't forget, this picture is taken in a huge grassy field, and there's blue light coming from the sky. So the nose is very blue, and the fur is gonna get very greenish yellow from all the grass. So is there a perfect white balance here? Maybe if you had like a little gray card or something next to him. But again, all the reflective light is tainting your true colors. So I would say just play with it, have fun with it, and see what looks good instead of focusing on, oh, what is objectively the right white balance. I would say this is kind of nice. Maybe a bit less on my screen, at least. Every screen is different as well, so you have to keep that in mind. Now we can talk about color. Color is a very tricky one. I would always keep it very subtle. Let me see. Do I have a version of this that's exported? I think I reset all my history, right? Yeah, that's the tricky part. So with color, you can do a few things. I'm gonna go out of the masking tool for now. But actually, let's do a combination. So you have this thing called color mixer, and you have the tone curve, and you also have like vibrance and saturation. These are all things you can do globally in your image. So tone curve is for your luminosity and stuff right now. You can do luminosity adjustments, but you can also do per channel adjustment. So this is red, green, and blue. And you could say, oh, I want it to be less warm at the dark spots in my image. You could take this and like lower the red channel right there. You can see that if I show you this, it's very subtle, but it's a lot less orange down here. I can make it a bit harsher. And then you have to be careful not to overshoot the top now. But yeah, you can see now it gets very, very green and blue at the bottom because we're reducing the reds from all the shadows. Oops, my control key is broken. So I cannot control Z very well. But I personally would go with the mask, actually. So I selected the fox again. My goal here is to make all the orange a bit more orange. So I've selected the fox mask. You can go all the way down. You can now also do the curves, right? But the easiest way, in my opinion, is to use a color mixer and just select like a medium orange. Not too dark, not too bright. Where did it go? Oh, it's somehow, it's up here now. Oh, that's the wrong side. Am I doing this right? Oh, here. When you have a mask, it's called point color. Okay. Oh, I'm not doing it right. I have to select the mask first, of course. Okay, finally. So you select the mask, you scroll down to point color, select the little eyedropper, and then select the color. And with this, you can now see that we've added a swatch, which is like basically one of the colors we can add. You can add more, like for example, this blue. So now we have blue and orange. So since we're inside the mask, we're adjusting the orange only within this mask. So this way, the orange in the background, we have a lot of orange in the background secretly. You can see that here. We're not adjusting that orange. So here, the the funny thing is the point color is also a type of mask. It's a color mask, which you can show by doing visualize range. If you select this, it shows you which part of the mask we're in is currently selected by this color. And you can see that it selected a lot of the face, but not enough, in my opinion. So you can adjust the range. See? So range basically says how much of the similarity of the color is being masked. With range 0, it's like the color within your image, within this mask that I'm selecting, it's very specific. And if you increase the range, it says, oh, you can see it also here. When I do this, the range of colors that is selected is very, very small. But if I do this, it like increases the size of the range. And with this, you can see that we've selected most of the fox's head. We can maybe also do a secondary orange because maybe this is not enough. Okay. I'm turning off visualize range so we can work in the context of the fox. And with this, you can now see that we're specifically adjusting the luminosity of that color on the fox's head. This becomes now it looks like a almost like a spray painted fox if you adjust this one. And with this, you can also change the color of that orange. So if you wanted a bit more yellow or a bit more red. And I personally try to steer away from like over editing, but some highlights, some pop in my image. I like that. So it's very, very subtle. So we started with this, and now we did this. It's more of that classic, almost like fairy tale fox orange. And it's a very subtle color change. You can see it here. I like that. So that's personally how I would adjust color, because if you try to do all this with, there's some very skilled people who can do this with with the tone curve, and they can do things with the color grading, which is kind of a different tool, right? Every little thing does something specific. I think the easiest way to adjust one certain color is to use the point, what's it called again? I forget. So let's select this one. So globally it's called color mixer, but when you have a mask, it's called point color. So I personally like that. And since we're in this, let's do the background as well. So let's say we don't want this, this, I don't know, like light yellow. We want to change the color or kind of the luminosity. And see that we can do the luminosity here specifically for that color. So I kind of want it to be slightly more green. Like this. So it's also very, very subtle. Okay, so that's what I would do with color. Anyone have any questions? Okay. Okay. One very big step I like to do is something called, I would call like presence. And presence is kind of a tricky thing as well to explain. I guess it's how much details are in a certain area and how much is distracting the viewer from looking at the image the way you want to. It's kind of a very vague, abstract thing to talk about. But let's say this fox, right? Uh, there's a lot of bokeh, which is all these like very soft circles and stuff in the background. There's a lot of that in the background. It's very nice, but it's also distracting because there's a lot of contrast. Same with the foreground. There's a lot of distracting little elements. So I've selected the background mask again, and I'm currently using the, like, going through the mask. There's a dehaze option. And with this, you can like increase or decrease the haze, as they call it. It's basically contrast, like local contrast, I would call it. So how much contrast is there between the lightest and darkest spots in your image? So if you do it all the way down, it almost becomes like a single color. It looks really weird. And if you do it all the way up, it gets really dark. So I personally, that's my style, is to lower the dehaze a little bit, because most digital cameras are very, very accurate and sharp. And I'm doing this for the background, right? So the foreground is still staying very sharp, but the background's getting a bit softer. Let's see, do I have an example? It's a tiny change, right? Okay. Um, that's not the best example to do the presence thing, because the image already is very tricky. Um, I can show you another one maybe for that one. And let's talk about vignette, because I do like vignette, especially for these like single subject images. Vignette is basically how dark your image gets around the edges. And if you're using like a modern digital camera, if you import your photo, there's this part called lens corrections. And most of the time, your Lightroom can actually recognize which model and make your lens is. Let me get a sip. So you can see here that I've shot this photo with a Canon lens, the Canon RF 100 to 400 f5.6 to 8 ISUSM, mouthful. But basically what it does is, I don't know if you can see it, but it automatically turns on these two options. And that's like a global setting. You can probably change that in like edit preferences. You can probably turn off that it automatically enables this when you import your images. It's technically nice to have it, but it also changes the look and feel of your image. So I'm turning it off and on. So don't forget, it was on by default. So turning it off is actually a manual setting. Chromatic aberration, there's barely any in this image, but it's another stylistic choice if you want that or not. So I would always, personally, I like to, when it comes to like subjects that aren't human, I like to turn off profile corrections, because who cares that something is slightly distorted as long as the image looks more natural. I feel like if you haven't seen the non-corrected one, you would think, oh, this looks pretty good. But I almost always, when I turn off this option, almost always I prefer this version. With this specific lens. There are some lenses that I do like to have the corrections on. But again, that's mostly because I shoot people with that lens, not animals or stuff like that. So that's the profile setting for your lens. But I also, like, when you turn it off, you can't do anything on this little tab. So if you go to manual, you can always adjust your cropping here manually. So what that profile correction did was basically increase or reduce the distortion, so it becomes like a bubble, right? Fish eye lens effect. This is like a pincushion effect. So for some lenses, you have to, especially like if you have like fish eye, you can correct it more by doing this, and vice versa. And you select constraint crop. So with this, it will crop it afterwards. So here, I usually do like to add a bit of vignetting. Vignetting is, you can do that here. You can also go down to effects. And vignetting, I'll show you right now. It's that effect. That effect that nobody actually really likes. And it looks really goofy when you have it very, very strong. Almost looks like a very old photo or someone falling asleep. You know, when in cartoons when someone is like falling asleep, you can see the eyelids shut, and it almost reminds me of that, like and then falling asleep. So you don't want too much of that, just a little bit, and then with this you can increase the highlights again, and you're like, what does that do? It does that. I like to imagine that if you have natural vignetting in your lens, the highlights stay bright. They do not get lowered in brightness, because that's like a very bright light, like light bundle coming through your lens. So I would always like max the highlights. It's very subtle. You can see it here better. See that? So on the complete edges, you can do this, or you can increase it all the way, and it will keep the highlights bright. Feather, roundness, midpoint, and then add a tiny bit. So this is the max amount I would do. And actually, let's make a snapshot here, pre-vignette, and let's make a snapshot here, post-vignette. So now we can do this. It's much easier, right, than like finding it here. So you can do it like that. I like the vignette. It depends on what kind of mood you're going for, but this gives that like slightly more focus on your image. That's basically my workflow. And let's see, do I have the first version? Yes. And it's the last version. It's not perfect, and I think I preferred my previous edit, but because I manually tweaked a lot more. It was like the history was huge, right? With a lot of little tweaks. But you can see here that I've basically redid the same effect and same styling, same mood. I've redone the same mood, this like with my workflow. And you can take this further, right? Like I wanted to show you guys this image, which is very underexposed. Again, most of my images were underexposed because I'm shooting very far in shadow. It's kind of hard to expose very correctly. Like if I wanted to, I would have exposed this really high, right? Like this, maybe. But then you would blow out the background, but also my camera, my lens just can't do that. It's f8. So it's a very dark lens. So I have to work with the limitations. I would rather not have like any blur, because if I increase the exposure time, you know, it will be blurry. There will be motion blur. And I wanted the fox, its movement, I wanted it to be very still. So yeah. Any questions so far? Because I've talked a lot.
I wonder, did you also calibrate your monitor? Because you discussed a lot about colors.
Yeah.
What is your opinion about calibrating your monitor?
Okay. I have recently, like a couple months ago, I've bought a calibration tool. I can send you the link afterwards. It was on sale. It was like 100 euros or something. It's, I think, the Calibrite something. It's like the cheapest option they have. Uh, my opinion is subjective. Again, I don't think you should ask me because I'm like not a professional photographer. But what I do want is to represent my photos correctly, right? I want my photos while I'm editing to be correctly represented as like an average monitor, which if you calibrate your monitor, it's not an average monitor. That's one point. It's like all viewing devices, you know, like your phone, your screen, your TV, whatever. Every single one of them has its own color color logic, basically. Like some companies say, okay, we want our images to be more bright. We're gonna increase the brightness or vibrancy. Some of them are like, no, we want more natural colors, so they reduce the saturation. And there's so many versions of like calibrated monitors out of the box that I think it's almost impossible to have a well calibrated monitor that fits all situations. That being said, having your monitor calibrated is a good way to start editing because um, having a completely messed up color profile on your computer, you'll have a very bad representation of your photo if you want to like publish it. And people, for example, high-end monitors or high-end telephones, like mobile phones, they do have very good calibration out of the box. It's just the lower end devices have pretty crappy calibration. So I think it's important to calibrate your monitor. Do you need an external device? For some people, maybe. I personally would say there are tools online. There's like, let me find it. Calibration. I think I used this one a lot. Um, it's an old one. I don't know if it's still relevant. There's this website called lagom.nl. With this, you can check certain things of your monitor. So there's a whole, like at the top, you can go through the entire process of calibration. And at first, they talk about contrast, and they say you're supposed to see all 32 steps of all colors. They give you examples of what it should look like and what it shouldn't look like. So, for example, this is too bright because the farthest edges are way too saturated and you can't really see the steps. And this is too dark because the darkest steps are impossible to see. And this looks good. Um, that's, for example, for contrast. And you have things for like gamma calibration, which almost every monitor I've ever tested is completely wrong about this. So I don't know if this is the best calibration tool, but you can definitely get close. They tell you what it should look like. Like the it's kind of tricky to show through Discord, but here as well. But for example, my monitor right now after calibration is too green. I know it is too green. Even like I do trust the Calibrite, right? You have to trust in technology, I guess. But I'm looking at my second monitor, which I also calibrated, and it has completely different colors. And you can say, yeah, this monitor is faulty, that monitor is faulty, the calibration software is not good enough, blah, blah, blah. You can't get a perfect calibration on every monitor. And every monitor has its own logic and own display. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I would say if you're really, really in doubt about your monitor, get a calibration device. Otherwise, use like online tools and other methods to just get very close. You can get like 99% of the way there without a calibration tool if you know what you're looking for. That's a very comprehensive response to your question. Um, I hope you can get something out of that. Any more questions? All right. I was thinking of quit like stopping here because I noticed I'm like drenched in sweat. Um, I'm gonna take a break either way. You're welcome to hang out. Like you're welcome to unmute and ask questions or just hang out with each other. I'm curious about your guys' workflow too. Like, did you learn anything new here, or is there stuff you're like, this makes no sense? You can ask anything. You're welcome to.
Yeah, there's some tools that you use that I don't, and some tools that I use that you don't. So
Mhm.
just that was it was good. Yeah, I learned some things. Thank you.
Which tools have you used that I don't? Like where you're like, oh, this is something I always use, and it's weird that he didn't use it.
We kind of talked about it a little when I was start experimenting with it, but sometimes I use the tone curve,
Or I
Hmm.
but
frequently use
sometimes I use
Silver
color.
FX Pro when I do the black and white conversion.
Sorry, let's first. I was listening to Matthew. You were talking about the tone curve, right?
Yeah, sometimes I just go to the color grading instead of
Hmm.
the tone curve.
Yeah, they're very similar as far as features, I think. Um, I do use the tone curve very rarely. Um, Again, I think I get most of my like my editing. I've got it done with other tools inside the program. Um, this is very powerful. If you get really good at this, you probably don't need most of the things I've talked about. But I feel like this is somewhat unintuitive. Like the main curve, I get that. Like getting the S curve to get the low, like the strong contrast and very, push the whites a bit, or like even like lower the whites and stuff. I get the concept, but when it comes to like channel editing and adjusting like even slightly, I think it changes so much of the look. You can also use this little thing here, and you can select a part of your image, and instead of guessing which part of that image is on the curve, you can like do it through here, which is very useful sometimes. Like especially with high contrast images, I would say that's useful. So for example, I want to increase the brightness of this darkest area here. Well, that didn't do it. Let me try that again. Nope. Let me try it with this curve. Kind of. It made it very, like, it's correctly placed. It's adjusting it right here. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this tool is very powerful if you have a lot of experience with it. And otherwise, you're going to struggle a bit and your images are going to look a bit faded or weird. But maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe there is a way to work with this, like a workflow that you can apply where you can get like really good editing with this. So Matthew, how do you use this then? Like, do you use it mostly for contrast or do you also use it for like actual color grading?
No, I use it for color grading, but those circles I feel apply things globally. And if I just want to make something a little bit warmer, a little bit colder, or a little more vintage, yeah, those I feel you can be a little, the circles you can be a little bit more subtle about.
Mm,
So first I like do it extreme and then I dial it back
mm,
and just get the general effect. So I use both of them, but yeah, just throw something on there
yeah.
and
I've
yeah,
used
you
this a
pull it to
lot
the
in the
edge.
back. I
Yeah,
usually do this one.
right.
And
There you
then
go. Exactly. Yeah.
like a tiny bit. Like you can increase it a lot and you'll get like the warm color tone in the highlights and the cool color tones in the shadows. But
Yeah, that's exactly right. I do it to the
yeah,
extreme and then I pull it
yeah.
back. Yeah.
It's a good way to get a certain vibe for sure. I think I've used it in certain photos, but I try to steer away from this nowadays. I don't know, it's just not my style anymore, I guess. You can always
And
add a little bit. Say
this
again?
might be more out of principle, but this might be you might do this differently out of principle, not out of technique. But I'm erasing a traffic cone right now. I use a lot of the AI tools. In this photo, probably not necessary,
Hmm.
but I just hate distracting objects.
Yeah,
So if it's something small, I'll just AI it out of there.
I get it. Nice. Yeah. for sure, like Lightroom has so many options. I scroll through this and it's just a bit overwhelming a lot of times. There's a lot of things I haven't talked about, of course, and I do multiple little tricks as well that I even haven't shown. Like I usually, instead of changing the colors, like honestly, I don't usually change the colors with the point mixer and stuff like that, unless it's like an image I want to spend an hour on editing. Usually I go to the calibration here at the bottom and I would change my greens towards the blue. Just a little hint. Increase my blue saturation and drop my red a tiny bit. Oh, usually what I notice is, let me see if I can show you. Is that even visible? Wait. Did it? Yeah, it did something. Okay. It's not enough. I'll show you by increasing it more. Okay. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see it actually, but currently I'm showing you the pre-calibration. And if I move my mouse away from this step, it's the post-calibration. I'll zoom in on the face. It's just, it pops more, I would say. And the greens in the image are more separated from the reds. So you get this effect of like, more like, almost like HDR in only the colors, not the contrast, which is an interesting effect. It's very saturated. But like these are small things I do, and if I apply them to all my photos, like I can show you guys this photo. It's a very different type of photo, I would say. Similar atmosphere. You got a green and highlights, and you've got a subject in the middle. But the way, like this was, I think, the original, and this is what I've done with it. It's very subtle. But mostly you'll see like the subject is, if I go to masks. Huh, I didn't select. I could have sworn I've done. Okay, maybe this is not the right version of the image. It's hard to show you guys this one because I have filters selected. I'm not sure if I have the right one here. Okay, I could have sworn I've done more than just this. I've selected the subject with the mask and stuff. Yeah, let's take a different one then. Yeah, this one is kind of interesting. This is the original, and this is the edit. Very subtle, I would say. But again, you can see that I've selected the foreground or the subject and the background, and I've adjusted things there. It's a very different vibe. There's some extreme examples of like editing. And this is also done like 2 years ago. And I think the original is this one. Hey,
Well,
Caleb.
another really big difference in our styles. I know I shouldn't do it, but I use the auto button. I always start with the auto button.
Oh,
I
really?
can't help it. I just can't help it. Yeah. And then I
Yeah,
adjust from the auto.
I get that. Yeah, the auto button, I used to use that too a lot. And I still sometimes do that just to see what it thinks it should do. I press this. Oh yeah, that's pretty nice. But it completely changes the look and feel. So I'm like,
It does. Yeah.
I usually dial it back. So sometimes when I'm lost, I'm like, where do I even start? I do press auto, and then like I do want this haze in the sky, but I don't want it that bright, so I lower the whites. So you'll get very close to the auto settings, but your own way. So you can definitely use the auto button as a the first step to go to, and I think it's completely valid. What I do not like about auto is it tries to make the image as clear as possible. Like for example, it makes it look HDR-y a lot of times. And that's something I try to avoid with my images. It's just not my style. This is not bad, right? I press auto and it got from this to this. Totally fine as a first step. But I think there's something that makes the image flat because the background is as saturated and as bright as the foreground. So then you go to masking and changing things and maybe even do the point color thing because you can do subject and then in here it's like the point. Where is it? It's like the orange and be like, okay, a bit more orange. Easy as that. It's very, very easy way to do that. Let me go to a different year. Attributes. I wanted to talk about this photo specifically and this one too. These are two really interesting edits. These are like my most recent edits I've done more seriously. This is the original image. You can see this whole person is gone in the front, in the foreground. You can also see that I've tried to make this super duper bright shirt a bit less bright and get some details out of there. And it's very subtle, but you'll see also the neck area. It was so bright before. I think it's the shirt reflecting on his neck, and the sun was a perfect angle to highlight his neck right here. So that's the original version, and then the last version, you can see the neck is actually kind of dark and almost like tanned in a natural way. It doesn't distract at all, in my opinion. If you don't look at the original image, at least, because if you take the original image again, it's like, oh yeah, this looks pretty good actually. This looks kind of weird now if you compare them side by side. But it's kind of interesting how like the modern way of editing goes for me. I didn't use masks a lot when I first started editing, but now it's a lot of masking. So you can see that I've masked this like lower body, and that's the cool part about Lightroom Classic. I don't know if the regular the regular Lightroom also has this option, but if you create a new subject mask, is that the way to do it, or was it person? Yeah, select people. So this is a very specific setting, I think, and it kind of like understands which people, like it's kind of weird why it doesn't select the other people, but maybe it realizes these people aren't in focus, so we don't care about them, maybe. So person one, you select them, and then here you have all these options, which is crazy to me. Clothes, facial hair, teeth, lips, like all the stuff. And you can be very specific about which part of this person you want to mask. So in my situation, I wanted to mask, the first mask was everything but his face. And then the second mask is the background. The third mask is a manual radial gradient. I can show you guys what it does when I turn it off and on. Oh, this is on, this is off. And this last mask is the entire person in front. I don't think I did anything with this mask. It's just there for fun, I guess. But the background, which is kind of interesting, if I turn off all the masks, you can see it completely changes. Well, not completely, but it does change the mood of the picture. Everything is a bit cooler. The highlights are kind of messed up without the masks. And his neck specifically is very interestingly bright. It's kind of funny without the mask. This person in front almost looks like cut out from the background. You can see his pants are very bright. While with the mask on, his pants get darker actually, because I've adjusted that specifically to compensate for the light in the background. So there's a lot of like little things you can do with this. And I personally like to add little light shafts like this one. just to highlight it, like the angle from the sun hitting his face and his body. I like to highlight it. Without this, it feels like, again, a bit cut out from the background because I'm using a very shallow depth of field, which is nice, but it creates this effect of like too clean. It's a bit too clean. Too there's a better word for it, like too medical almost. And I've applied that on this picture too. Like this is the original. And this is a very tricky one. When you're shooting in forests, your subjects are usually very dark, unless they're like sitting perfectly in the sunlight. But then it's also the light is too harsh. So the gentle, like soft light of the shade of the forest is very nice, but it's hard to keep the subjects well lit in that situation. So in this situation, I did add subject first, which is again mask, and selected all the like all the people in the front, but not correctly. Like it selected the face of this person, but not their body. And it didn't. It barely selected this person. It's a bit like masked. You can see it's a bit red, but not a lot. But that's fine. Then I increase the exposure of these people just for this mask. But immediately you'll see, oh, this doesn't seem right. The exposure is too high. I adjusted the shadows a bit. And then I increased the exposure of the entire image. I adjusted the white balance. It used to be like very green, like all their skin tones. If you look at this, let's take a look at his face. He's very green if you compare it to the adjustment I've made. It goes from this green to like a more human color instead of, looking at the Hulk. Then I added background, which is the background mask. And I adjusted the highlights of the background because you can see clearly the trees and the foliage in the background right here are overexposed. So I adjusted the highlights. Here's my dehaze adjustment that I like to do. So it makes the local contrast of the background a bit less intense. The best example I would have for this is like, I'm not sure exactly. Like I would say like in areas where there's a lot of shade, but also very bright parts, if you add some dehaze, it makes it a bit more gentle. There's a bit of like faint glow throughout the entire image. Like tiny little adjustments. I keep adjusting because the foreground people in the foreground were too bright here. So I lowered their exposure a bit because you can like sometimes you can clearly tell like this person is cut out of the background. This even with like direct sunlight, it still wouldn't look like this. So like you have to be very tasteful and gentle with it. All the sliders, like maybe increments of 1 and 2, and you can use your cursor keys on your keyboard as well. Stuff like that. Radial gradient. I've adjusted the blacks, the background. Okay, here you can see that I've this is one like my little trick I do is adding the radial gradient. I start like this. You can see it here too, by the way. I updated it and now it's like a huge light shaft going for the left side, following the natural direction of the light. And then with that mask selected, I adjust certain things. And then I would say, here, let's take the last version and turn off specifically this light shaft. It's not perfect. Like I can always see flaws. I'm like, oh yeah, if I turn it off, there are some parts that I still like about the image, right? Maybe it's a bit too bright with the shaft on. So yeah, that's how I took an image that's like this to all the way to this. And I think it's a huge improvement personally. I think like it's not a horrible image, but you can barely see the people. The background is too bright. And now we have like an actual fun image to look at. It's well lit. And yeah, it doesn't look too unnatural, which I try to like always keep in mind. Is like, is my green too green? Is my skin tone too saturated? It's a bit tough though. Sometimes you're like, you're just dealing with the image you've taken and it wasn't in good conditions. No. Let's see. Nothing of 2024. But that's it. I hope you guys learned a few things. And some of the concepts, again, you can apply them to other photo editing software too. It's not just Lightroom Classic. But yeah, if you have any other tool or thing you want to talk about, and maybe you have certain workflows you want to show off or like teach us, you're welcome to try that too. Like you can send me a message, be like, hey, I want to give a little workshop, or I want you to give a workshop about something. Feel free to do so. So thank you for coming. And
Thank you for your time.
yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say is just, well, this isn't the truth, as always. It's very subjective. Do like Google and do your own research. Do that. I would like to do more of these. And if you have questions specifically about certain things in Lightroom Classic that you've come across, don't hesitate to ask me personally, like send me a message. And maybe we can do another one of these where I go in depth about slightly different settings. And maybe Matthew can show us how he actually uses the filtering correctly, because I don't really use that.
And do a lot with keywords. I could, yeah, it'd be interesting to compare. I don't do much different from you, but it would be interesting just to.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and collections are
Yeah.
for books.
Ah, that's for books.
Yeah, I had to do that once. It was not so easy and or
Hmm.
intuitive.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I would like to see that. I'm interested.
I could do it. Yeah, but we'll talk about that later. Thank you.
Yep.
That was interesting. Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to do more of these as well.
Thanks, guys. You're welcome to hang out, or have finally or enjoy your weekend. See you.
Bye.
Have a nice weekend.